Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Creed Strategies for this month's Creed Speaks panel, Our Minds Matter, the Education Black Children Deserve. I'm Lauren Wells. I'm founder of Creed Strategies, and Creed is a Newark-based consulting team that works with school districts, nonprofits, government agencies to address issues of oppression and design institutions focused on achieving racial justice for the communities they serve. Through our Creed Speaks series, we are sparking conversation and dialogue that we hope pushes us as an organization, our panelists, and our attendees to think about what we want to grow, that is, what we want to create, and how we do that in deep relationship with ourselves as actors of change and the communities to which we all belong. It is obviously Black History Month. Black History Week was created in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson and later became Black History Month. And while we have brought this group of people together to build together in a way that only they can during Black History Month, this work is their life's work, and this discussion is a discussion that they have every day in every aspect of their life, in the circles that they travel, and the world that they are trying to create for the children that we all love. Black Lives Matter in School Week was last week. This year, Black Lives Matter in School is calling on all of us to focus on a year of purpose and engage in ongoing activations and reflections throughout the school year. This discussion that we will have this evening takes place in this spirit and in solidarity with Black Lives Matter in School. So this is a year that makes Black History Month a little more significant. We've lost some giants in the last year. We lost John Lewis. We lost C.T. Vivian. We lost Joseph Lowery, Hank Aaron, and Cicely Tyson. And all of these people have contributed to our lives and shaped the liberties and the rights that we have and the narratives that we see and the stories that we have the opportunity to learn about ourselves and about our history in ways that are literally beyond the scope of this discussion and literally beyond words at this time. We are here a year after almost the murder of George Floyd, the awakening of white supremacy in a way that it has not been above ground in a very long time, and also the awakening of racial awareness that has taken place around the world as we have seen people protesting in solidarity for justice for George Floyd and for Black people in America. We have also seen in this last election what our political power looks like in action, both with the election of President Biden and Kamala Harris, as well as the outcomes in the state of Georgia. So we are living in a pandemic, and the impacts and consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on Black people and Black communities is seismic and will be felt for who knows how long into the future. Two pandemics we live in the middle of, right? Which continue to harm and challenge us profoundly as people. And this panel is designed to push us to think about our role in imagining and transforming education so we can create and, in the words of Adrienne Maree Brown, embody the just and liberated worlds we long for. I have a distinguished panel here tonight. They probably need no introduction to most of you on this Zoom. However, I will do them the honor of introducing them and actually in the order that I met them. So we are joined this evening by Mayor Raz J. Baraka, who is the 40th mayor of the city of Newark, and he is now in his second term. He is a native of Newark whose family goes back more than 70 years. He has transformed this city from a narrative, an external narrative of a troubled city to a city of opportunity with more than $4 billion of development underway. There are a number of accomplishments that he holds under his belt, and as a former colleague and a former member of his administration, I could list them all and it would take the whole hour and a half that we have together. I think that it is important to know that he is focused on creating an equitable city guided by principles of racial, social, environmental, and economic justice, and ensuring that all residents benefit from the growing prosperity and eliminating income disparities in wealth, employment, and income. And education, as we all know, has very much to do with that in the society that we live in. Next, I introduce Dr. Yvette Jackson, esteemed educator and mentor to me. Dr. Jackson is the winner of the 2019 Global Minded Inclusive Leader Award. She's the author of Pedagogy of Competence, Inspiring High Intellectual Performance in Urban Schools, which received the 2012 Forward Review's Silver Book Award. She is internationally recognized for her work in equity consciousness, assessing and eliciting the innate learning potential of disenfranchised urban students. Dr. Jackson was a student of Dr. Reuben Feuerstein, whose work has shaped her work and who has influenced many in the field when really thinking about how to mediate learning and accelerate learning for children who have experienced serious conditions and challenges in their lives. She is an adjunct professor at Teachers College, Columbia University, and a senior scholar for the National Urban Alliance for Effective Education, founded at the College Board and Teachers College. She's published a lot of books. She's spoken in many, many places, and she is truly an influence on me and on the Newark Public School District and many districts across the country. Principal Baruti Kafele is a highly regarded urban educator in New Jersey for more than 20 years. He has distinguished himself as a master teacher and a transformational school leader. As an elementary school teacher in East Orange, New Jersey, in addition to being named the East Orange School District and Essex County Public Schools Teacher of the Year, Principal Kafele was a finalist for New Jersey State Teacher of the Year and a recipient of the New Jersey Education Award of Excellence. He is also a prolific author. He writes all the time. All of these folks are writing all of the time. He is also a prolific speaker, and he is also an influencer of the next generation of education leaders, whether they be vice principals or principals. You can see him on Facebook Live every Saturday at 11 a.m., I think, dropping gems and knowledge and giving of his time to those who are aspiring to walk in the leadership shoes. And then we have Dr. Yolanda Sealy-Ruiz, who is just amazing. She is an award-winning associate professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. Her research focuses on racial literacy in teacher education, Black girl literacies, and Black and Latinx male high school students. She is a sought-after speaker on issues of race, culturally responsive pedagogy, and diversity. She works with K-12 and higher education school communities to increase their racial literacy and to move toward more equitable school experiences for their Black and Latinx students. A little piece of hidden information. I don't know if it's hidden because it's in your bio, but she appeared in Spike Lee's Two Fists Up. We're gonna be all right. So she's kind of a celebrity too.
Oh, going on the cover.
She is the editor of 3 books on education and numerous scholarly articles and essays. And I am just lucky to be here in community with these 4 knowledgeable, experienced, loving, committed people who believe in our young people and who want to create schools that build their minds, right? That add to their minds, that nurture their minds. And so this conversation, we will talk about where we are. We're going to get into vision, and then we're going to talk about how we get there. And you're all here to hear from them. So the first question that I'm posing this evening, and I will start with Mayor Baraka, because I'd like for you, from your very high up place as the mayor, right? You see everything. You have your eyes on the system, but you were also a principal. I'd like for you to share with us your thoughts about the state of Black education for children in their schools, communities, and homes.
Thank you, Dr. Wells, for having me on this panel. This is an incredible panel you got put together here, by the way. These some great folks. I think the discussion is going to be high powered. You know, I believe that, you know, the remedies that we try to use to abate some of the things or mitigate the effects of white supremacy in this country and marginalization of our young people and ourselves, right? Through education. The interesting thing is that we try to educate our young people about things that we don't know about. You know, the first problem with Black Studies programs, San Francisco State and all those other places is actually finding the people to teach the courses because they matriculated through the same educational system that miseducated them to try to teach our children. And so we are affected by the same trauma and all the other things that we're trying to prevent our kids from being engulfed in. And so that in and of itself is difficult. And the system that we're working against is entrenched, is robust, it is obviously durable. And so we have to be very creative and imaginative and not be afraid to challenge some of the things that go on, from curriculum to the organization of the systems itself, to the way school days are organized, to how our kids live and breathe, to what's going on in our community. Our schools are not designed around our communities at all, right? And they're designed around something that maybe took place maybe 100 years ago even, not even the present sense of what we're dealing with in urban America. They're not designed for us to be responsive to it. And so we could talk about this like for days. And then people believe that we fix this by bringing these like very smart individuals in, and they can carry and do everything by themselves. And that's just impossible to do. You need a comprehensive system to push back against a comprehensive system. You need great leaders, you need great principals, you need great teachers, but that in and of itself is not the answer, right? And we need to understand that, period. And our school systems are not connected to the bigger system. It's separate and isolated from the bigger system, right. Which is a problem for us. And lastly, I think that we've even created competition with one another, like this whole charter and public and even individual schools that are at one another. That's the most backward-minded kind of thing that we can be doing in this setting now, because we need all of the resources to be collectively and collaboratively used, not pulled apart. And we need all of our thinking to be forward, like thinking, and not concentrating on the best of the kids or even the worst of the kids, because most of our kids are somewhere in the middle, right? And we need to focus on that big mass middle that we're missing out on, and begin to push more of them over that edge towards success. And I think we can do that, even though I talked about how durable and the system is. I think we can do it. I think we can, build what we need to build. I think we have the intelligence, the resources, even. The will we have to have has to be there, right? And we have to love ourselves more collectively, than anything else. And I think that fundamentally that's been the problem, at least from my perspective.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Jackson, I would like to invite you in to build on what the mayor has said.
Oh, he said so many things, but I was thinking, when we talk about what we can do for our children, the main thing, first of all, is to believe in their innate potential. Many of us really don't believe that. We say that we want equity, we say that we want to set them up for a future, but we don't really believe that these kids are born with the highest level of innate potential. Now, if we really believe that, then like the mayor is saying, we wouldn't accept anything less than a gifted type of education for all kids. See, there wouldn't be any gifted schools, meaning programs only, but it would be, this is the way we do business. We believe that when you push kids to the frontier of their intelligence, and even notice my words, the frontier of their intelligence, when we give them invitations to use their strengths, and when we prepare them for leadership, not just a job, but really to be leaders, if that's what we were really doing. So think about this. We have been dealing with Title I for years, and people have been getting money to identify deficits in students. That's what people get the money for. Imagine if this president, if Kamala, if they came out and they said, we are going to start giving money to school systems that really identify their student strengths and set up the kinds of practices and opportunities that really push their strengths forward, all of a sudden we'd find all of these strengths. We've been doing the opposite of that. And so in this work that we have to do, since this is an inflection point, is we've got to flip the script and say, when we start school for our kids, it is by starting identifying their strengths, believing in their innate potential, and setting up the kinds of opportunities, as I said, that push them to that frontier. That's going to be really, really critical. Things that we usually do, even things like the arts. You know, people often think about, well, for our kids, we have to have more literacy. That's the thing. And that just means reading and writing. And those are tools. I'm talking about, how do you push kids so that they can be on the epicenter of innovation, the epicenter of their own creativity, because that's where they want to go. And so as we continue this panel, the idea is going to be, what is the best? When we say thriving and flourishing, what do we ensure our kids get? And what are the impermissibles that none of us will tolerate anymore?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Principal Kafele, I see you smiling and swiveling over there. So I'm going to ask you to jump in with some of that excitement.
Yeah, I swivel and move because I'm used to walking across stages all day, and now I'm locked in this chair, so I can't. But when we talk about the state of education for Black children, that's always an interesting discussion on a panel, because typically we're having this macro conversation, and I'm a micro thinker. I'm a micro doer, and I want to kind of put my remarks in that vacuum, if I can, for the folks who are watching. Yesterday I wrote this blog, and it asked the question: teacher, if your lesson was a mirror, would your students see their reflection in it? And I think about that often, because we're talking about the state of education for Black children. And when you look at Black children, you look at Black and brown children, do they see themselves as a part of the process relative to who they are? But the question is not even a question necessarily to be asked solely of them. I'm starting all the way with the superintendent and the board members. In terms of what's happening under that umbrella in your district, do the children that walk into those doors every day or log on to a computer during a pandemic, do they see themselves in the lesson? And I don't mean necessarily, I could mean history, but I don't mean history right now. We'll do that later. But right now, I just mean in terms of what's happening in the language arts curriculum, in the science curriculum, in the math curriculum, the social studies, the PE, the health, the CTE, whatever. Do I see the relationship between it and me? Do I see the relationship or the correlation between it and my life after that dismissal bell rings at 3 o'clock? Do I see where I can take this along with me, right? And if I'm sitting in a classroom and I don't see its relevance to me, whether it be just the relevance relative to the lesson or the relevance as it relates to cultural relevance, cultural responsiveness, right? And then the cultural competence of a teacher, then it's going to be very difficult for my brilliant self to embrace something that I don't see a reflection of myself in it. Real quick, the folks who are on here right now, is 122 of them on Zoom. They're only locked in and will only stay on if they see themselves in this discussion. And at that point, if at that point, the 5 of us become irrelevant,
right,
they're gonna bounce.
Right.
And that's the same thing that happens in a classroom every day. I don't see the relevance.
Right.
How do I make this relevant for me?
Right.
Thank you, Principal. So this is a nice segue to you, Dr. Sealy-Ruiz, and your racial literacy work, but also the work that you do around relevance, meaning, connection. Can you jump in now and just build on what you heard?
Sure. First, Dr. Wells, I want to thank you for pulling this panel together. It is indeed an honor. I was taking notes, and I came this evening being ready to hopefully share some things, but also to be taught from the master teachers, including yourself, who are here. As the mayor was speaking, the R just kept coming into my mind about how we need to reimagine, we need to reinvent, we need to reorganize, we need to reinvigorate, and we need to remember. And I want to make this connection to you, Dr. Jackson, because before my bestie, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, came out with her book, Cultivating Genius, your work talked about the genius of our children. Your work built on Baba Asa Hilliard, who said, I've never met a child who is not genius. And so the first thing you have to do is recognize their genius. The second thing you do is love them.
Right.
And so this is what is absent for the most part in our schools, right? So before we even talk about relevant pedagogy, and I want folks to do like their archaeology of the self and find out where that racism lives within them, people find it a difficult task to love the Black children that sit before them.
Right.
And it is in part because they don't know that much about us. If they knew, Mayor Baraka, about your father and the Black radical tradition, if they understood that their every day has something to do with the Black person when you opened up the refrigerator, or when you did not crash your car because there's a traffic light, or when you bend down to tie your shoes, you would understand the relevance that Black life has in your life.
Right.
And that perhaps may switch the way that you see us. And so this idea of relevancy, they don't know us.
Right.
We haven't been taught about us, right? I came into my consciousness in my 20s after studying Victorian literature, which I like that too. I'm complex. I can read, that too. I can do that. But like when Toni Morrison said she heard jazz for the first time, she just lost her mind.
Right.
And so there's this lack of knowledge, lack of recognizing our genius, Dr. Jackson, that you have written about, Brother Baruti, that you talk about, and you try to raise that consciousness and principles to have them understand that they need to see their own genius before they can see their children's geniuses.
Right.
And Mayor Baraka, what you're trying to do on a city level for schools is what needs to be. We need to reimagine, to reinvent, to reinvigorate, but to remember that we start out as geniuses.
That's right.
This is not new for us.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know if I answered the question. I'm
did.
just all fired up now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to build on what Yolanda said. And,
Absolutely.
the idea is, the other word I like to put with remember is discover. Because if you really set out the experiences to unleash the brilliance, you will discover more than you could have ever imagined. But you see, we have to value that. We have to say our kids are of such value, not just to us as a people, but to this country. And if people understood that, now how do we prove that? We give kids the opportunity to really push forward on that genius, right? Piaget so long ago said, if you want high level thinking, you have to have high level activities. You can't be dumbing stuff down. You can't be talking about literacy as being the epicenter. You've got to be challenging the kids and saying, and here's the tools you need to get to that challenge. We have to give an enormous amount of enrichment. What do I mean about enrichment? I just mean anything that's going to turn a kid on. That to me is enrichment. So I'm not just saying, people think when I say that we're talking about going to museum. Museum is nice, but if nobody is really engaging the kids in the experience, like Baruti was saying, in terms of connecting themselves to that, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. So we're challenging now the remember and discover idea. Remember what it takes, that we have this enormous potential, all gray matter, that we have, that when we put kids and act like they're gifted, they will show us their gifts. In fact, they will surpass us. But I'm really going to push forward this idea of the leadership of our kids, because people say, okay, you're saying they should have gifted education so they'll do better in school. No, so they will be leaders in whatever they choose to do. Our goal should always be these kids are going to be our leaders who protect us, who save us, who take us into the next dimension. And that's why we want to set that up so we can continually be discovering this.
So are you jumping in, Mayor?
I was, but you
Go
can.
ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just think what Dr. Jackson is saying is actually a radical notion.
Mm-hmm.
And that, people think it's simple, but it's a radical notion, particularly in a place that's governed by white supremacy, that makes it difficult for us to see our children as successful.
Right.
And so the system that's set up now is based on a deficit model.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to catch up by slowing down.
Yeah.
Which is illogical in the first place, right? You cannot catch up by remediating.
Right.
It's impossible. You will always be behind. And so the
Oh,
idea that everybody is gifted will just it sounds almost ridiculous to some people, right? And so to set up systems that does not represent that is a heavy lift. And it takes a lot of people to do that. First of all, English 1, English 2, English 3, English 4, these all need to be thrown away.
Right.
All of that needs to be thrown away. Foundations, math, all this stuff, all of it is garbage. It doesn't work. It has never worked. It puts our kid on a cycle of failure, right? We believe if a kid fails a class, then we ought to give it to them again over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And hopefully that they may pass it. We never look at the curriculum and say, is there something in this curriculum that's causing our kids to reject what's happening here? That's a part of this failure. We don't do that because it's a radical idea to do that.
It is. I totally agree with you about that. And that's what we have to be, if it means to be radical. But the thing is, we have the science that proves what we're saying is right. You don't even have to look at it on a racial basis, and we can really dislocate that idea totally anyway. But the science is saying that every child is born with this propensity for this kind of thinking at such high levels. And we know that they are born to be engaged. They are born to want to contribute. We keep closing that door on them and pushing down. It's like, I remember once being in England and watching all of these swans, and they looked majestic. And as soon as they landed on the ground and were just walking, they were wobbling, they were falling all over the place. And that's what I feel about our kids, that they are majestic, that if you just let them fly, but as soon as you pull them down into, like the mayor was saying, this curriculum that doesn't connect to them, they start fumbling. And it's because this isn't their space is to be up there flying. And how do we give that? And we have the proof. I ask teachers, what do you need to believe that our kids have this potential? What would make you believe? And so, of course, the first thing they say is data. Okay, what kind of data? The test scores? Those test scores are not telling you about kids' potential.
It's the self-data that they need to do. They need to do the self-data.
Look at that. And so how do we assess kids? Every lesson should be an opportunity to see growth, but you've got to be setting up the engagement and the support for that growth to happen, which means, again, you've got to believe. So if I could say, I just want to say one last thing. If I could say anything, the system of teaching our teachers has got to change.
Yes.
It has so got, because anything, like the mayor saying, anything else we're talking about, it doesn't matter. But if teachers are not trained in a belief system, expected to achieve that and push forward on that belief, we're not getting anywhere. We got to really totally change what it means to be an educated teacher.
That was a good segue, because I actually, go ahead, Kafele, and then I'm coming around to you, Dr.
This is such a rich discussion. I didn't want it to leave without me throwing my 2 cents in here. Think about you all know the NBA and folks who are watching. I won't make a basketball analogy, but you remember last year they played in a bubble.
Mhm.
And when I witnessed that, when I heard about it and then subsequently witnessed it in my mind, and I'm sure in the mind of many, I said, this is not going to work. This season is not going to come to a conclusion because the virus will somehow seep into it, probably through employees, right? So, but what happened, as the world knows, the virus never came in. They were in this airtight bubble. So as I looked at that, and as I typically look at the world through the lens of an educator, I said, you know, there's a parallel here between what happened with this bubble and teachers in the classroom. You figure Black children comprise about 17% of children nationally. Black women are about 6%, and Black men are about less than 2%, about 1.3, 1.4%. So the overwhelming majority of teachers are white teachers at about 80 to 84%. And many children will go K-12 without ever having seen a teacher that looks like you and I. So here's the thing, and going to what Dr. Jackson said, so and going beyond teacher preparation, you'll have a teacher who is born and grows up in a bubble over here. So as I'm in that bubble, just as that virus never seeped into this bubble, life of Black people, who Black people are, understanding the greatness, the genius of Black people may never make it into this bubble. So now my exposure to Black people is what I see on the television, what I see when I'm walking past you in the mall or at the stadium, or the arena, whatever it may be. But in terms of intimate familiarity with Black people, I don't know that. So I'm growing up in my bubble. Now I go on to pre-service in an undergrad program, and I may be in classes with people who look just like the ones I grew up with. So now I'm going through those 4 years, and then I wind up in a school. I'm in a classroom, and the only place it was hiring was in Newark, right, in an urban school district. So now I'm in this new bubble that I know nothing about. All I know is what I've been exposed to through media and in passing on the street. So it's very difficult in that regard to conceptualize anything that would defy the stereotype of what I've been exposed to in the first place. So it becomes just a never-ending cycle. So when we talk about, well, what we need to do at pre-service, which I preach the sermon throughout the country in terms of what we need to do in the undergraduate school, but here's the problem with that. It's like here we are in the midst of Black History Month. So some teacher will take a book off the shelf, blow the dust off, and talk about Harriet Tubman or Booker T. Washington or Dr. King or Rosa Parks or Malcolm, and then that's pretty much it, right? So now what'll happen is, so we'll have those lessons in February, and it's like, oh, okay, and then we'll go back to the status quo in March. Well, a teacher could live their whole life, and then at 18, 19, I'm in college, and now I'm hearing something, but I'm not fully immersed in it to the extent that I can embrace it. So as the mayor was saying, there's got to be a fundamental systems change, right? In terms of this to work for Black children, because I'm in enough schools nationally to see that Black children are suffering north, south, east, west, relative to how the system is right now.
So all of this is a perfect segue to you, Dr. Sealy-Ruiz. And, I would add to, the exposure that we are all sort of infused with from media and from the social world around us about the negative and deficit-based views of who we are, both in terms of our contributions, but just as human beings. School, School plays a very big role, going to the point the mayor made about teachers being those who came through the system, coming into the system to be those who teach the kids. So when you think about the work that has to be done, Dr. Sealy-Ruiz, in teacher education and schools of education around racial literacy development and the deprogramming that is necessary for teachers to be able to even begin to engage in a new concept of who Black children are, who Black people are, and who their communities are, what does that look like in the work that you do?
It's definitely not what's there. I tell you that. It's not what's there. It's not there where I am, although we are within my program, and you know, Teachers College is 130 years old. And so it is deeply embedded in white supremacy culture and understanding, right? As all these institutions are. So anything that we're offering, it seems radical to them. What we need is not just the one diversity course. That's number one. We need a full, robust, like history courses, right? I think about Khalil Gibran Muhammad that talked about historical literacy, which is part of the racial literacy model that I'm working with. There has to be like a deep history about, and not just the one sociology class, not just the one Black history class. If you are a teacher, Black or otherwise, teaching Black and Latin children, you must have an understanding of their history in a very nuanced and complex ways. So that's number one, that we need to have multiple, if I could have designed something, multiple history courses. We need to have language courses beyond just checking off, you know, okay, I met the language requirement. If you are teaching students of Latinx background who speak Spanish in their home, you as a teacher, you need to learn the language.
Right.
You need to have some facility with it that you can understand the students when they're speaking, and not like some of our schools are saying, don't speak Spanish in school.
Right.
This is an English immersion.
Right.
What are we talking about here? We need to have classes like what Dr. Lauren, what you're talking about, that do this kind of self-probing, this self-work, this archaeology of this stuff is real. Now, if you need, you know, therapy is important. Can I describe archaeology of the self? Yes.
A bit about it, because I really want people to understand the personal work and the personal commitment that is necessary, right? Because our brains are software. And there's this programming that's happened. And it doesn't just, you don't just wake up and say, okay, I read a book, to Principal Kafele's point, and I'm woke now. No, woke is not a state, it's an ongoing process, right? It's something that you constantly have to keep doing. You have to keep waking up. So what does it look like in your racial literacy model to keep bringing people back to the beliefs that are buried in their brain that creep up on us when we're least expecting it? And it comes out in the fact that we said we value gifted education for all, but we're going to give remediation to these kids. And when we have to make a budget decision, to a conversation we were having earlier, we're going to give the gifted program to the advanced students who might be the white students in the school, and we're going to forego whatever it is that the kids who need acceleration need, right? Like our choices are made based on what the beliefs are in our heads, and they're macro and they're micro, to Principal Kafele's point.
I mean, Dr. Wells, you just laid it out. First of all, we know that Black children not doing well is profitable, right? All of these corporations, and even the own Department of Education in my state where I was a school, I went through public school, have these intimate relationships with testing companies, and you know, who's writing the curriculum. You know, as my friend Goldie would always say, who are we hiring to write the curriculum? Are we hiring Black folk and Black organizations that are writing curriculum? The answer is no, because it's not on the regents, and who is profiting from the regents? So, you know, I don't want to get too off track, but for us to really understand the depth of this. And so when we talk about archaeology of the self and the different components, a major component is historical literacy, like really understanding how communities, how schools have been shaped the way that they are by design. What the archaeology of the self offers is a deep excavation of our biases, of our beliefs, of sometimes the hate, right, that we have for some communities. And what I'm suggesting is that as you do that excavation, much like an archaeologist that digs for something deep and something delicate and something that will help you understand more about the culture, that we have to like excavate. And what I say is replace it with this critical love. And love that is the kind of love that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King talked about in terms of love and power connected to justice, the love Paulo Freire talks about, the love Bell Hooks talks about, love for liberation. But many cannot look at us and love us. So that's the first thing. So if you can't love us, how are you going to desire our freedom and our liberation and our emancipation, which is really what education is supposed to do? So I keep going back to the R's. You know, when Mayor first opened up, it really is reinventing, reinvigorating, reimagining. We have to, as Bettina Love would say, abolish
Right.
the system as it is in existence for Black and Latinx children. And as we abolish and tear down, we build up. We have enough people that have done this work for decades that have a plan.
Absolutely.
The question is, do we have the courage, and will it become profitable when we start excelling in schools the way that we know we're capable of doing? Who's going to lose money from that is the question.
Right. That's right.
Whew.
I don't know if I answered the
So
question,
that's,
but
so
Lord,
that system in operation, right? And
Right.
it's so deep. It's
Yeah.
so deep. And not for people to get overwhelmed, because if you think about our ancestors, think about the civil rights movement, those before us.
Right.
Look where we are now, right? We're not where we should be, but they loved us enough to believe that we could make gains. We are changing things. Things
Absolutely.
are possible to change. But we have to also know what we are fighting. As Jamila Liscott would say, what are we fighting for and what are we fighting against? And
Right.
this goes deep, and people have to do the self-work, because the self-work, those are the people that make the policies, that write the curriculum, that pass the laws. If
Right.
they don't excavate their biases and their beliefs and their stereotypes, they're just going to let the status quo be maintained. So even though it's a system, individuals make up systems, and individuals have to do that self-work of excavation their bias and excavate their biases. That's archaeology of self.
Thank you, Dr. Sealy-Ruiz. So let's get practical, because I know that there are superintendents and principals and department chairs and other folks on this Zoom who are interested in understanding what the abolishing that you're talking about, what does that look like and how do you do that? So I'm going to invite you all in at this point in the conversation to begin to articulate steps that if you were in the leadership position right now, and you have been, you would be taking and have taken in your school buildings, in your departments, to begin to dismantle the way that these systems have been working to continue the cycle of miseducation of our children in our communities. And I'm going to ask those of you who have questions to drop them in the Q&A. Please don't drop them in the chat. There's too many comments there to track, and I will never be able to find them. So it's open to whoever wants to jump into the applied practical piece first.
I think that, you know, that's, wow. I mean, first, I think the number one thing is the way school is organized. Time and scheduling is important. Like, and they need to be organized. It needs to be organized around our community and not around this agrarian system with a European context, right? It has to. We have to figure out what time looks like. Time for students, time for teachers, and we have to be creative with that. We don't have to do this 9-to-5 schedule thing, you know, off in the summer, work in the winter, this kind of thing. We should be able to be flexible about the way that looks. Maybe there is some classes we should have in the summer. Maybe all classes shouldn't be 50 minutes. Maybe some should be shorter, some should be longer. All of that, and we should figure that out because that's important. Two, I think the most important, the curriculum is terrible. Like it is not designed for us to be successful. You know, period. You know, we're not in school to learn language. Like language is a tool. The ideas exist in the language, right? We're here to learn ideas. When I was at Central, people used to say, "Oh," I would tell the kids, "You're not here to learn English," like the Dominican children, the kids from Haiti. You're here to learn math and science and be doctors and lawyers. You're using the language as a tool to get there, right? Yeah. And so we have to get out of this desire to teach people. The English lost the war. So I don't know why we're teaching English in the first place. So at the end of the day, we should be teaching ideas. Right. And these ideas and how to grasp ideas. And you learn the language through communication, right? You become advanced in language when your communication advances. When you're able to discuss larger ideas, then your language advances, your vocabulary advances. The way you use your vocabulary and construct it in sentences advance because you're engaged in ideas, not because you know subject-verb agreement, right? Because of ideas, and that's important that we do that and make. Then we have to make it more practical for our kids, more pragmatic for them. And the last piece is we are going to have to address the fact that everybody else had a 400-year head start. We're gonna have to address that. And I think we've been addressing it the wrong way. We've been addressing it by giving kids a series of remedial classes, making kids take the same classes over and over again. Like if you fail one class, then you have to take that same class over. Why can't you take another kind of class that gives you that same content in another way? And if you pass that, so all of these CTEs should be full credit, not half credit.
Right.
That's a whole thing that we need to get. I can talk about this for a long time, but I don't want to do it. I want to let everybody else jump in. But I just think the whole thing, we just have to have the courage to like turn it all upside down, right? And inside out. And we have to have smart enough people to get in there and get it done.
So we have to reimagine what does time mean in school? How is it used? What time is spent on what? And if I could add to that, I might think that means the same thing for the adults as much as it does for the students.
Absolutely.
They're just rethinking what time and the purpose of time and how we spend time in the school building. We have to excavate the curriculum, right? Back to the past and reimagine a curriculum for the future. And we have to address the past. And I see you, Principal Kafele, jumping in to add on these concrete, practical ideas from the mayor.
Yeah, you know, I love everything that Mayor Baraka just said. And, you know, I'm thinking about it at the district level, right? And I'm being very generic. Now, I don't want to be accused of focusing on any particular district. I've walked away from several superintendent offerings in this state, and for a variety of different reasons. Just wasn't feeling it at the time. Got used to entrepreneurship, but I always say to myself, or to anyone willing to listen, if I was the superintendent, right, all the time, if I was, and in the context of where we are in this conversation, I always say, if I was the superintendent, although my number one priority is young people, in this regard, they're not. My number one priority, if I was superintendent, is every principal in that district, right? Everybody else is secondary for me. That principal is my number one priority. So therefore, you'd be hard pressed to find me at central office, right? And if you need me to be there, then I don't want the job. And that's kind of why I'm not a superintendent right now, because I gotta live in the buildings. I gotta make sure that principal, just going back to what Mayor Baraka said and what the two of you have, well, actually the three of you have said throughout this presentation, that's the conversation I gotta have with the principal on an ongoing basis. Because if I'm going to transform a school and make that school a better place for Black children, it's got to happen under the leadership of that principal. So now, as I'm building a team under my leadership as superintendent, do I have a team where we're on not necessarily the exact same page, but we've got some common thinking? Because I don't want to rob you of your individuality, but do we have some common thinking around properly educating Black children, right? So let me throw this example in there to give an example. I'm sitting here watching the TV on January 6th, just like the rest of you, right? And I've got my own feeling and interpretation of the insurrection at the Capitol, right? But as I'm looking at it, I'm not looking at it as just a US citizen watching what's happening to the Capitol. I'm looking at it through the lens of a Black man, and as you were saying earlier, Dr. Wells, I'm looking at it through the lens of being a descendant of our ancestors. So I'm saying what I'm watching is nothing new. There's nothing new in terms of what I saw January 6th when I look at it through a Black lens, because I'm looking at white mob violence. So therefore, I'm looking at something that has been happening to Black people throughout the centuries in this country. Now, one could say, but what does that have to do with Black people on January 6th? Well, number one, I saw Confederate flags that nobody condemned. And number two, I saw a noose outside. So I have to look at it through the lens of a Black man. So now I'm saying that's the conversation. Like you may know, Dr. Wells, I did a whole hour on that on the Saturday broadcast, right? That weekend. But I'm saying here, I'm going to have that conversation with my entire district, meaning my principal staff, right? That let's analyze this. Let's dissect this as it relative to how it relates to our children, right? Do our teachers have that perspective in terms of when they saw it, can they look at it from the vantage point of Black people looking at it, right? So in other words, I want to develop as a superintendent a level of consciousness in my principals, regardless of their own race, ethnicity, culture, background, nationality, doesn't matter. It's just a matter of undoing, rebuilding, remolding, reshaping the way they see the children and what it is that they're receiving, so that we're looking at the education of young people through a different lens. Some of you may know that when I was a principal in East Orange, I had a superintendent who was on the same page with me. So I said, Dr. Howard, allow me to Africanize this school because 99% of these kids are Black. Allow me to write curriculum and individuals on my staff that speak to who they are. So elective courses in ancient Egyptian studies, or ancient Kemetic studies, elective courses in African-American studies, and then we make Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Gunther, and others staples in the building, right? So allow me to do that, and I promise you we'll be the highest performing school in the district, right? He said, okay, do it. So we made Malefi Asante's textbook on African-American history, Journey to Liberation, a required text. We made Tony Browder's text, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, a required text for 7th graders, right? Whereas, as you would know, Ato Bakari was the one that taught the class. So now, yeah, we exceeded everyone in East Orange, but we went beyond East Orange on the state level. Wasn't nobody touching that school. So the question was, how so? What did you guys do that was so different? I said, very simple. We're on the same page. As I said, at the superintendent level, we're on the same page, understanding what they need. And as they understood what they needed, the children produced, because going back to what I said before, they saw themselves in the reflection of the lesson, right? And that's, for me, that's key when we talk about turning this whole thing around.
So let me ask you a question, Principal Kafele, since you put yourself in the seat of the superintendent. What in this seat, as you're building this team, right, and you're building this collective consciousness to Africanize 1 school, 10 schools within your district, what is your development process like as the superintendent? What are you doing in that ultimate leadership position to continue your growth and your development, presuming that you are not Principal Kafele,
right,
and you're some other superintendent
my
without the knowledge
growth,
that you bring?
right? My own professional growth?
Yes. Without the knowledge that you already bring. You don't have all of this deep in your head and your DNA and your genes. You haven't been reading all of the things that you just shared with us.
I love that you framed it that way, you know, because here's the thing. If I'm not bringing this kind of literature that's behind me in other parts of the house here, if I'm not bringing that, I'm not equipped. And I'm just going to be frank. I'm not equipped to work in these schools because I don't have that foundation. Right, I gotta have that. That's the ground upon which I stand. Right. So if I don't have that foundation, I'm not equipped to do this work. Even though I'm crazy about children, I love children, I want to see them do well. I got that, but I don't know what to do. Right. Yeah, I got to know what to do. But inherent in knowing what to do, I got to know who they are. Because if teacher is sitting in that classroom and I don't, and let me be very clear. I'm not just talking about a teacher that's not Black. I'm talking to a Black teacher too, that don't know who that is in his mirror, right? I'm talking to him too, right? So I'm saying here, it's equivalent to the youngster sitting in the classroom. Because think about that teacher that under the question you just asked me, and now you got teachers in the building, because I meet these teachers in every state in this nation that will say to me, Principal Kafele, why are we having a conversation about race? Because I don't see race. I don't see Black children, white children, Latinx children. Well, they ain't saying Latinx, they say Hispanic, right? So Hispanic children and so on and so forth. I don't see that. I just see children, they'll say to me. And I said, you know, by you saying that, that's equivalent to the youngster saying to you without saying, teacher, if you don't see my race, you don't see me. And if you don't see me, you cannot effectively teach me. And if you can't effectively teach me, then why am I in this classroom in the first place?
Right.
So at the superintendent level, that's what I want to change.
That
Right.
is-
In addition to everything else that's entailed with being a superintendent, I understand.
Oh, when we come back to the end, because there are people in the seat, right, who don't have all of what you just said, but they're there
I know.
right now.
And then we scratch our heads wondering what's wrong with the children. That's crazy that you wonder.
They can learn it.
You said they can learn it?
Yeah, they can read. They can read. Reading is, you know.
Somebody got to steer them to the right book. Like if I don't know a Mary Baraka, right, then I can't conceptualize knowing a Mary Baraka, right? Somebody's got to lead me to your father.
Right.
Because if they don't lead me in that direction, I don't even know he was born. And I promise you, there's a lot of people in New Jersey that don't know your father was born because nobody led them in that direction.
So
Right.
every leader needs a leader. I just heard you say they need
That's
somebody
right.
to lead them. All right, so we're gonna plug that in to our practical things. The superintendents need to have people that they follow also and that lead them to greater knowledge of the
100%.
world and of themselves.
Right.
Dr. Sealy-Ruiz and Dr. Jackson, I want you to jump in here with some concrete application to how
Right.
we build this
Absolutely.
re-envisioned, reimagined place that we're going.
I have two quick things. I'm grateful that this panel is called Our Minds Matter,
Mhm.
but our bodies also matter. And
Right.
so what I want to do, I want to abolish these zero tolerance policies
Right.
that keep putting our babies in these detention roles,
Right.
suspending them and
That's right.
putting them in a situation where they're
That's right.
vulnerable to police and to other spaces, right? I mean, right now we're in remote learning, but we also know when remote started happening that they were trying to figure out how to suspend children online. So I want us to, yes, our minds,
That I
but
read.
also our bodies, the protection of the preciousness of our bodies. The other thing I'd like to do is really look at the ethos in these schools, the relationships among teachers, because some of the teachers don't like each other. And when
Exactly.
the teachers don't like each other and don't respect each other, it's first of all, the children are always watching. So how do we create ethos within school buildings
Right.
where it's cultivated that teachers learn to respect, even if they don't like one another, because we know we're from different areas, but can we be respectful of one another and have an environment that kids want to walk into the building, that they want to be around the teachers. So I want to work with the ethos of the building, and I want to abolish the negative environments among teachers that kids are participating in, and then that anger seeps into classrooms sometimes. When teachers are pissed off at their colleagues, they bring that into the classroom with the students. And I also want to abolish these zero tolerance policies that put our babies in harm's way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I was thinking exactly the same thing. And I was thinking, with the ethos, there are cells in the brain that are called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are exactly what they sound like. Kids pick up behavior totally unconsciously. So when you see kids who are acting out, they have been seeing acting out. They have been watching the teachers who are acting out. They've been watching people who are acting less than to them. So when we talk about this idea of how do we restructure, first of all, we have to think of schools as communities of belonging, where all of our kids feel, I belong here because I am getting the attention I need within myself to look at myself. That's one thing. So there has to be a sense of affiliation. I want to be able to pull together. Now, why do I say that's so important? Because when you go back and think about something like the Dred Scott decision, remember that, where you were told you're really of a slave race. That was what they were saying. That idea that you are not like us, you are less than us, that started obviously with enslavement, because that's how they got to do what they did to enslave people. You weren't really human. So when I talk about affiliation, how do kids get the opportunity to say that they had these human universalities, these needs, but also these beautiful abilities that I talked about before as being so critical. The other thing I want to say about that, though, is what Yolanda was saying about how do you get people to work together in a collegial kind of way where the way you're dealing with the students is really going to affect not only the kids, but you as the teacher. You don't feel good here. Now, here's the other thing I want to say. That means giving a lot of that kind of introspection that Yolanda was talking about, that archaeology of self. But here's the other thing. We should always be teaching towards genius. Now, what does that mean? What does it look like to be an expert in any one of the disciplines? And I mean a real expert in a discipline. Then if you were thinking that, you would be learning conceptually, you would be learning interdisciplinarily, transdiscipline. No expert thinks only in a subject. They go way beyond that. Now, why doesn't that happen in middle school or high school? Well, the reason it doesn't happen is because most teachers are only trained in a subject. They are not trained in the discipline, the art of learning across disciplines. Now, why is that? You know, there was a man who was the superintendent in Seattle many years ago, and he was really a general, had been a general in the Army. He was a very close friend of Colin Powell's. He gets to be the superintendent in Seattle, and this is what he says the first year he is there. He says, what I'm going to do is set it up so that high school teachers every summer have to have an internship with in a job area of their discipline. So if you're a math teacher, maybe you'll be with an archaeologist, maybe you'll be with an architect, maybe you will be with somebody who does an accountant, maybe you'll be with people who are working on the economy. Now, why do I say that? Because the idea is if we're trying to teach our kids to make sense of disciplines and really look at their applicability in the real world, you've got to have teachers who have been there as well. And they haven't taught there within the discipline. They haven't lived in the discipline. That to me is also something that has to be looked at, because we're talking about nurturing our kids to think outside of the box, to go across the different areas. But like the mayor said in the beginning, the structure of the school isn't even set up for that. You can't do that in a 45-minute period. You have to have block scheduling. You have to have advisory systems in the schools where kids during the course of the time are really being told, you are good, you are being affirmed, you are being supported. That's a whole different structure that has to be integrated in there. And the last thing is, teachers really have to really learn more about the science of learning. How do we not know more about what's happening to the brain and how to move the brain if you don't have to study about that? And the last thing I'll say about that is, how do we have students and teachers learning together, especially if it's about the neuroscience, the cognitive science, the thinking beyond, thinking of those big ideas? How do we change that so that these schools are really shared reciprocal learning spaces? Because these kids come in with lots of knowledge themselves, and that knowledge should be looked at and built upon.
Dr. Wells, can I say something about that?
Absolutely, jump in there.
You know, so what Dr. Jackson said is, 100% true. I think the problem is even the way we think about those things.
Right.
We have to think about our thinking when we arrange it. Like, I know I said on this thing, I said something about subject verb agreement, and I know people are gonna say, oh, you need that, right? But listen, we look at it in a linear way. Subject verb agreement is important, but we don't have to teach it in a linear way.
Exactly.
It's not linear, it's cyclical. Babies don't learn conversation because you sit them down. They learn from you, from watching and communicating and engaging with you. You have to engage ideas with students, and those ideas help you to understand why it's necessary. Because I can't communicate with you properly unless you understand me. How do I make you understand what I'm saying on a higher level? My language has to become more advanced. Right. And we have to understand that. So even when we're talking about on the things that Dr. Jackson was saying. We have to look at it. So like block scheduling and all of these things. People do these things, but they do it in a very, like they disrupt the very principle of what should happen. So block scheduling to them means 90 minutes of the same thing they've been teaching in 30 minutes.
Right.
45 minutes, so you double up 45 minutes of a class, which is crazy to me. Because the kid failed in 45 minutes doesn't mean he's going to pass in 90, right? He might fail twice, right? So the idea is something has to change in that 45, the other 45 minutes have to be clearly different than the first 45 minutes. There has to be something that's very cyclical about that, right? And not this kind of linear thinking that we get that in fact does not embrace our culture in the first place.
Right. It should.
And doesn't, even this language conversation, which I had with a couple of friends over lunch last week, right, is a deficit-based view of how Black people speak English and a lack of understanding of how the way in which we speak English is derived from the morphology of the languages that we spoke when we were transported unwillingly across the ocean, right? So it's another way of getting deep at us and destroying something that we have created that is an example of our resilience and our adaptivity and our genius and our creativity. And we have so many questions in here. We do. We have a lot of questions. And since we started 15 minutes late, I'm holding you guys after class. 15 minutes. So that we can use
We're with you.
We're going to use time a little bit more creatively here. So I'm going to start with some real practical questions. There's a question here that's asking about how we change the narrative, which we have been talking about. But the second part of that question is, how do we sift through our educators, our pool of educators, whether they be teachers, leaders, aides, whomever, to ensure that they are fully equipped to teach Black or brown babies? How do you get, right, to a group of people in your building who you have as a leader or as a superintendent gone through some sort of assessment process that allows you to determine where people's mindsets are? What does that look like?
I'm going to let Brother Kafele speak, but I'm just thinking of the work of Carol Lee and her husband, but specifically Carol Lee around cultural modeling. What's the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that we've thought about this.
Absolutely.
And that we offered, as I say in the words of these two sisters, Dr. Shemaine Bertrand and Keisha Porcher, they have this Black Gaze podcast. We have the Black print.
Absolutely.
We have it.
Absolutely.
It's there.
It is.
Let's do it. That's all that I really have to say, is that it is absolutely there. And I'm just anxious to hear what my colleagues have to say about this. I have other thoughts, but it's there.
Yeah, when you asked the question, you know, I obviously had the principal's hat on, and I'm thinking about the interview, but better word than interview is the conversation,
right?
The conversation that we're going to have,
right?
And I'm known to say you don't have to bring a portfolio. I'm not going to look at it. I've never seen a portfolio in my life, right? Because I don't care what you're going to show me, right? What I care about is the quality of the conversation we're about to have. So, toward gauging this candidate's understanding of the children that we service, we're gonna have a lengthy conversation, right? And that's knowing that there's a shortage of teachers out there, but we're still going to have that conversation. When I would bring a speaker into the building to speak, we got to have a conversation first, because I need to hear who you are and what you're going to bring, even though I've done research on you or I know you, right? But in the context of being amongst my students. So with a teacher, and I know that you're going to be married to the building once you get hired and get tenure, I have to know that you're a good fit, right? So therefore, because I'm going to be that meticulous with it, my method of recruitment has to be solid because I don't have a large pool to draw from, right? So alternate ways to go about recruiting staff so that I've got the right team in the building. So we're gonna have the conversation, the tough conversation, the difficult conversation, the uncomfortable conversation that a lot of folks might not want to have on an interview around race, right? And that could be with a white teacher, but that could also be with a Black teacher, right? It could be with whomever. And then that way I get to hear who you are. And then I can make decisions around whether or not you're somebody that's going to play your role in taking us to another level. But it's having the audacity to have an uncomfortable conversation with a candidate.
Now, Lauren, I want to add to that 3 things. First of all, I would ask the teachers coming in, tell me about your grading system. Like, how do you grade kids? Because right away, if you tell me I have really high expectations and so I feel comfortable failing kids because they've got to meet my expectations, or you're out, right? Because if that's how you grade kids, by just giving them a test, then I know, first of all, you really don't know pedagogy. I know that you don't know that, because you should tell me I don't grade kids, I help assess learning growth. That should be your immediate response to me. If I don't hear that, then I know that's going to be an issue. My second question is going to be, tell me about your discipline system. Like, how do you discipline kids? Now, of course, that's also a trick question, because when you tell me that you have these rules, you have these ways of doing things around those rules and your tolerance level, then I know you got to go also, because you should tell me discipline means about how kids take care of themselves. It's self-discipline. It's how that's what I need to hear. And then I'm going to ask you, tell me how you help kids get to know you, right? Because now people aren't expecting that. They think I'm going to ask, how do you get to know your kids? No, but see, my teacher once said, it's not just about how you get to know kids, but how do you let them get into your head? Because see, kids want to know how you are thinking. They want to know what's important to you. They want to know what drives you. Because why? Because kids are naturally born to try to please. So they want to know really how you're thinking so they can get there. And doesn't that make sense? It's how you should grade. They should know what you're really looking for. Like, people would talk about creating different kind of rubrics and things like that. No, I'm talking about, what do you do to help kids really get it? But those would be, I'd ask them about discipline. I'd ask them about grading. And again, I'm really listening for assessing learning growth, what you do to support that. I want you to tell me that every lesson I set up, it's so I can see how much kids grew during the course of that lesson and what the application is going to be and how I'm going to help them get there. So I'm going to—
Dr. Jackson, these kids have no discipline.
Yeah, well, first of all,
I'm just saying, that's why they're you see them, they're
okay. But I'm glad you said that, because
discipline, they have no discipline.
That's good. I'm glad you said that, and that's why you will not be at my school.
Can I ask?
That's the answer. If you're not going to be working here, because if you think that, if you really believe that, it tells me so much about your expectation. You're wrong, and you really don't know how to teach children. So good. I'm glad you said that. We will not be calling you back, Dr. Wells.
So here's a follow-up question. You guys let somebody—
a question?
Yes.
Dr. Jackson, let me play devil's advocate on that.
Yes.
I'm 22 years old.
Yeah.
I'm fresh out of college.
Yeah.
I'm on my first interview.
Yes.
And you asked me a question about grading.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you're looking for. So
that's right.
So I might go give you the A, B, C, D, E, right? Because I don't know where you are in that, right? And I've never done this before. Mm-hmm. Would you be able to, instead of writing me off at that point, does that not become instructive?
Absolutely.
If I'm showing you some potential?
No, absolutely. If you tell me I have some ideas about this, see what I'm looking for. If you just tell me the traditional answers, then yeah, this is probably the way you would train, but what I want to know is my next question to you. If you give me the traditional, I would say to you, well, tell me about assessment. See, assessment is really different than grading, right?
Yeah.
Now you should be telling me something about learning as soon as I say assessment. So I'm sorry, if you're 22 and you can't tell me something about assessment goes with learning, then I will ask you some more questions, and maybe this is a place for more mediation. But there are some kids who even come in at 22 who are just, and we all know the program that they could have come through, where they have a very narrow view of our kids and how what you're supposed to do to discipline. You know what program I'm talking about. I won't say it,
Well, a
but
lot
you
of
know what I'm talking about. You know what so what I'm saying to you is, yes, Baruti, I think that I should be open to listening for where the possibilities are, but I'm also waiting to hear, are you adamantly just very closed about certain things? But if I put out the idea of assessment, if I put out instead of discipline, or if we're talking about discipline, I say, how do you help kids do well? Because to me, that is discipline. I want you to do well. Then you should be able to tell me something beyond, I send them to the office. I send them to the office.
no, I got you. Got you.
No, I was.
I'm the 22-year-old, and this is the second question from our audience viewers out there.
Okay.
I'm the 22-year-old that Principal Kafele just mentioned, that you
Right.
went through this series of questions with, they slipped through. You hired me.
Oh, okay, you slipped through.
How-
Okay.
You hired me. How are you supporting me? And you're finding out some things about me, right? How are you supporting me to do what it is that we have been talking about needs to be done in the classroom?
Who's that for?
You have me, all of you, whoever wants to answer it. You have me,
I'ma
you
give you
own me
10
now,
seconds.
not married.
10-second answer. See, if I'm superintendent, then I'm holding my principals accountable for coaching those teachers up,
Yes.
right? See, so it's because they're going to come in deficient, right? They're
Yes.
not going to come in all knowing. But
Right.
as principal, that's my primary responsibility, called instructional leadership. Everything
That's right.
else is secondary.
That's right.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I think when Lauren had asked you that question, and I think it was really more as the superintendent hat, but what are leaders, principals doing to edify themselves, right? What do they do? Because the superintendent's not going to come around and set up. They may do some leadership training with the principals, but I would hope that what they're saying is, I am looking forward to you edifying yourself on many different levels so you can coach these teachers in a way that is powerful and is demonstrating the knowledge that the kids have, addressing that. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
So let me tell you who else people say has no discipline. Them parents, man. Those parents, problems, unruly, challenging. They don't care. I mean, they just really don't care whether their kids learn.
Mhm.
They don't care whether or not they go to school. They have no expectations for them. So this is a two-part question. One about the relationship of schools to parents and community.
Right.
And then the other is, what are things that parents can do to be a part of what it is you all have envisioned as this community of belonging that
Mhm.
elevates our students' learning and understanding of themselves to their genius?
Mhm.
I would actually love to hear the mayor's thought on that, just because of his experience with communities. But, you know, as I think about most parents, they did not go to school within a beloved community.
Right.
Most parents were treated very similarly than
Absolutely.
how we were or how students are treated. So it really is going to be the leadership of that building, the relationship that the principal asked the teachers to cultivate with the parents, the invitation that the parents have to feel like that is a building for them. You know, look at these private schools, you know, where people are bringing their children, not just to the door, they're going up to the classroom. There's coffee set for them. There's donuts. There's like, yeah, parents, we want you in the building. you have to understand that most of the parents that send our children to the same schools have been traumatized by the same system. So it really will have to be a relationship that has to be built, that we have to gain the trust of parents. And one thing that I know for sure about Black folk and Black parents, that yes, we are harsh sometimes, but you show us that you respect us, and you listen to us, and there is a respect for our community, we will work with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the community school model, that's why it's so important to make sure that the school is the community and the community is the school. We used to have parent walkthroughs at Central. Like we'd have classroom walkthroughs with the administrators. We do one with, we had peer walkthroughs and we had parent walkthroughs. So parents would go walk through class. We would give them a training of the day of how to fill out the rubric, what they're looking for, what they should see, based on what we expect teachers to be teaching. This is what we're looking for when we go through. So we train them in that, and then we send them through and allow them to have discussions about that with us, about what they saw in the class and in the building as they did walkthroughs. Which one, it does a couple of things. It respects their intellect, right? It lets you know, it lets them know that you believe that they have something valuable to offer. Two, it puts them in a place of being a part of their own child's growth and development, and having a say-so about what is actually being taught and how it's being taught in the school, and places for them, whether it's an opportunity to open up the building so they can do resumes, or open up the building so they can do other specific things. That's what community school is about. At Hawthorne, we would have an event for the kids, but while the event for the kids was going on simultaneously, we had an event for the parents, so they could be in the building with our kids, because sometimes the kids couldn't come to the events because the parents had to do other things, or they had to get a babysitter. All of that was important, right? And so we have to think about the school as being a part of the larger community and not isolated from them. The idea that we have is that we're here to improve the community by teaching these babies who, if we don't do that, the community is going to fall apart, right? And that's the problem, right? You're a part of that community, and so your job is to bring parents into the building, and that's what we try to do, and bring the building to the parents.
Absolutely, and you said that so perfectly in terms of what Yolanda also said, that word, the invitation, bringing them in, giving them the opportunity to walk through that school, and even having students lead the parents on those walks.
Right.
The students can lead the walk. They can even tell you what to look for. They can help you then figure out, if you didn't see it, this is how we can talk about it. Let's train, because parents will come when kids are leading too. Parents will come because they see what value you have placed on their child to put them in that kind of a leadership role. So that is so critical. But you were also right, Mayor, when you were saying the community school. It's like Comer's model of also having the health facility, all kinds of different things that happen at that place, because it's the hub. It's the hub. So that becomes really critical.
It sounds to me like y'all just want to open up the school and let everybody in, and like have joy and connect.
And love, right, Yolanda? And love. That's
and all
right.
of that stuff happening. Like, well, I don't understand. We sit at desks. We have a teacher that stands in the middle. You rotate through your centers, and then you demonstrate that you learn the letter A and what it sounds like, and then you can identify it in a word. And if you don't, then I go sit you over there and you practice some more. Like, I don't know. You have totally disrupted my thought of what school is supposed to be like.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. I think of kids, I work in places where kids do TED Talks for parents and community. Why can't kids do TED Talks? They have things that they're really interested in. and then it pushes them to that genius side of it. Yeah, so come in and hear the kids. And the mayor mentioned Hawthorne. I mean, I remember when I was working at Hawthorne Middle School, and we were having students and teachers do, like I said earlier, professional learning together. They were sitting planning lessons together because the kids could say, you want to know how to engage the children in the next lesson? You should start with this song, with this act, with this something. The kids are on it. That the kids can say words like pedagogy, and they can talk about neuroscience, neurotransmitters. And I'm talking about 6-year-old kids. I'm talking about the babies. Why not? But when you say what should happen in a school, it is where everybody is learning. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, really believing in the ability of kids takes teachers to believe not only in the potential of kids, but in their ability to elicit that potential. If they don't feel that they have the keys to do that or the training to do that, often they will turn it back on the kids and say, they just don't get it. They just don't get it, when it's not about that at all. It's about the kids got it. All you got to do is bring it out.
Principal Kafele, I saw you trying to get in, and then we're going to bring this home.
With the parent.
You're on mute. Oh, no, you're not. Go ahead.
Yeah, with the parent piece, you know, this age of COVID is obviously horrific, right?
Yeah.
But there's some things, there's some silver linings that have emerged relative to a lot of things, but in this case, school, and that is as it relates to parents. I used Zoom before the pandemic for people who interviewed me doing podcasting. So it was a one-on-one thing. And I never conceptualized using it for anything else except just to be a guest on someone's podcast. But then when the pandemic hit, and learning the capacity of a Zoom or any virtual platform, I thought about school. And those schools that struggle in bringing parents into the building, you don't need them in the building anymore. Even if we put this virus behind us, which I don't think we ever will. I think life has changed. But in terms of just them being back in school, this is still here. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that makes me want to go back into being a principal is just to prove the point that I could host 100% parent meetings. Let's say on every Monday night at 7 o'clock. I could have hundreds of parents on a Zoom call and have a conversation, have my teachers on the call, but this would be my meeting, right? Just them on the call to hear what's being said, but this would be my meeting with parents. I don't have to mandate it. I can create a culture, right? Where parents know that at 7 o'clock on Mondays, Principal Kafele has his weekly parent meeting. And now I can give that update and communicate with them. I can have hundreds of parents on the call and then set up other days, other evenings where those parents that want to talk to me a little bit more personally, or those small groups, I can do that. But the point I'm making is I know definitively that I could pull it off, right? And make it happen, that I'm gonna have the masses of the parents on the call. Right? Because now there's no more legitimate excuse that I don't want to walk through the neighborhood, or I don't want to come home that late, given where I live, all that kind of stuff that we used to hear. I can just log on. I can do it on my phone. I can do it on my tablet. I can do whatever it is, but we can have that conversation, and I can just pour a wealth of information, or provide a wealth of information to them, but also have an ear to hear what it is that they want to say to me toward us making whatever adjustments we need to make at the school at the macro level. And then we have the smaller conversations at the micro level.
Yeah.
Just the creativity with what we have here that a lot of us didn't know we had until the pandemic hit.
That's true. That's true.
So we're going to close it out. And in the interest of the ongoing self-development conversation that we had around Superintendent Kafele, as you all say some closing remarks, I would like for you to share with the audience a suggested book that they could pick up, a book, a TED Talk, a video, something that someone can leave this conversation with, go put their hands on, and begin to do some of what it was we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And I can call on you, or you can just jump in and go with the flow.
Pedagogy and Confidence by Dr. Yvette Jackson.
I love
Pedagogy
this.
confidence.
I love this mayor.
There we go.
And it's true. And as a companion text to Dr. Jackson's brilliant work that I was blessed to review when it came out. So thank you again, Dr. Jackson. I would add Cultivating Genius. The
Yes.
books speak
Absolutely.
to each other, and Cultivating Genius offers a framework for the lesson planning, which is often the toughest thing for teachers to get their heads wrapped around. So I would
Absolutely.
recognize that along with Dr. Jackson's book, Pedagogy of Confidence.
Oh,
Okay. The two on the right, or my right, you can't recommend your own book.
Oh,
Pick a different book.
No. I was going to recommend, first of all,
you mean I can't promote these?
You can't do that. You can hold
Go
it up.
for it.
No, I'm
You
just
can. But I want you to
Don't be
recommend another book.
shy. Look at Love from the Vortex.
There
Don't
you
be
go.
shy. I'm trying to
No, you
spread
can promote,
love.
but I still want you to offer something else.
I was. I'm not on.
No, that was
Be
funny. That
serious.
was funny, but it was good. That was good.
You see how close I keep them near me.
I
right?
love it. Hey, I understand that.
No, for me, in terms of recommendation, anybody that knows me, they know what book is in my hand, right? Today is February 8th. We're in the 8th day of Black History Month. And in my book, if you're an educator and you don't have this book, it won't look like this.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But the Miseducation of the Negro by
right.
Prodigy Woodson. This came from Liberation Bookstore up in Harlem back in the 80s. So this,
Ooh.
It looked like it.
yeah.
Look at all the different
There
versions.
you go.
of the book.
You got one. You got that new school version. See, this
I
is the
do,
old
yeah.
joint right here.
Yeah,
Right.
old school.
I know.
Oh,
That's 'cause
If
we
you're an
from different
educator, this the book here. No principal, no
That's right.
superintendent, no teacher, no parent should
That's true.
should be without this book as a part of your arsenal. This written in
Absolutely.
1933, but
That's
still one of
right.
the most potent books
Very
that
much
we can
so.
have in our hands today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And your array
Right.
of your books.
No, don't worry about
Dr.
that. Go to principalkafele.com. You see all that stuff.
There you go.
Principalkafele.com.
Right. That's great. I would recommend both a podcast and a book because they're really by the same author. Some of you know Resma Menikin. And
Yes.
Right. And his book, My Grandmother's Hands, but also
Yes.
the podcast on NPR on Being, when it's called Notice the Rage, Notice the Silence, because what he is he is a specialist on racialized trauma. But the way he writes and the exercises that he has in the book are just so accessible. But now that people are talking about, let's have some deep conversations about race, he's saying, first of all, we are bodies of culture, which means we are bodies of emotion. You just don't throw people into those conversations without having all kind of preparation. But it's just beautiful text. So I'm throwing that out there.
Can I say
so
countering the conspiracy? Can I say countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. We're gonna have a whole syllabus at the end of this.
There you go.
Got volume 1 and 2.
There we go.
No, that's the wrong one. Here we go. That's still the wrong one. What are we doing here? Oh, I'm on the
That's it.
reverse. There we go. There we go.
Oh, I love it.
Amazing.
I love it.
So
I
there's some
love it.
questions in the audience about whether or not we're going to do this again. And seeing as how much fun we're all having and the laughter, I think perhaps we should have that discussion in the future. But I also think that a conference of some sort collectively planned might be an interesting thing to do. So with that, me planting that seed in all of your foreheads and loving the way that you're also responsive to me, I will follow up with you on that, and we'll see if we can get anywhere with kind of thinking about what we could collectively pull together. I'm really grateful for all 4 of you. I'm grateful for the work that you do. I'm grateful for the teaching that you have provided me over, my work with you all. I'm, Principal Kafele, when Global Village was happening, you were just an open door, and I can't tell you how helpful that was to me in the role that I was in and the lack of preparedness that I had for it. You helped me get prepared. Mayor, we ride together. And I appreciate the resilience and the consistency that you have to your values and your principles, and that they show up all the time in the decisions that you make. And you're in a different seat now, and it requires them to show up differently. And I understand that, and I respect that, and I respect you tremendously for just how you keep moving the city forward. Yolanda, you are the mentor of life. You are the most supportive person that I know. You always have a loving word to shine on a day, and the insight and the wisdom is just remarkable. And I thank you for just being available to me and to everyone the way that you are. And Dr. Jackson, boy, you throw me out there on the ledge, but I know it's all from love, because you see that genius and you're
I
like,
did throw you
like,
out
go
there,
catch
but
that genius.
that's only because you are ready for being out there. You lead, and thank you for pulling
And
us
so
together.
thank you all for giving of yourselves in this discussion. I think people are very happy. And I hope that everybody continues to be well, that your loved ones continue to be well, and that this year is a year of transformation, for you personally and for us collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. Love you and appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
Great
Bye-bye.
job.
Bye.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye,
both.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take
You all.
care.
Okay, bye-bye.